Hello guys, welcome to Online Web Tutor presented by Prophetic Solutions team. I am Sanjay. From this playlist guys, we are going to create a new exciting playlist of WordPress called WordPress Globals Beginner Tutorial, and this is our first part. In this video session guys, we will discuss about introduction, types and examples. First of all, we will understand about the globals concept in case of PHP language. After going through PHP language guys, we will see about globals concept in WordPress in our upcoming videos. And also guys, if you are a beginner to this channel, then please don't forget to subscribe and keep watching our previous playlist to get the clear concept about WordPress customizations. So basically guys, as we know that PHP contains many super variables actually we will use in our programming. So if we switch back to our next slide. So basically, what is global variables? What are global variables in PHP? So several predefined variables in PHP are superglobals, which means that they are always accessible regardless of a scope, and you can actually access them from any function, class or file without having to do anything special to them. So from the definition guys, as we have seen in our PHP language that actually we have used several times about get, post, request and many more something called files. So as we know that in PHP language there are variable scopes. So scope can be defined as the range of availability of a variable has to the program in which it is declared. So these are the variable scopes called local variables, global variables, static variables and function parameters. So here we have a reference PDF link guys actually by going through this link. So if I copy this link, go to browser, and now if I open a new tab, this is a PDF actually we can find which basically defines all the conditions, all the variable scopes concept. You can go through this PDF and read all the variable scopes like local, global, static and function parameters. Inside this playlist guys, we are going to learn about global variables. So just move to our slides. Now these are the scopes. So if we go to our next slide, so what are superglobal variables in PHP? So these are the variables guys actually you have used in our PHP programming like server, request, post, get, files, env, cookie and session. These are the variables that I hope that you have used in our PHP programming. While using these variables guys, as we have seen that we can access these variables either in class, functions or anywhere in our programming without going through its scope. So how can we declare our global variables? Is there any option in PHP to declare global variables? Yes, we have by using globals. So by using globals guys, actually we can access all the global variables defined in our class or anywhere actually in the scope of a function, in a block, in a class. So how can we achieve this task? So here we have written some definition section of our globals. So just move to our next slide. So what are PHP globals? Globals is a PHP super global variable which is used to access global variables. Suppose guys we have declared some of our variables in our programming which actually we want to use in the scope of a function, in the scope of a block or anywhere in the class. So basically by using globals, this is a super global variable. So by using this variable actually we can access those variables in our code. So PHP stores all the global variables in an array called globals index, and this is the index, means this is the key name or the variable name that we have declared as a global parameter. So the index holds the name of the variable. So if I scroll down, this is a sample example guys that I have written something to understand about the global variables. Here inside the PHP tag we have a simple example like we have declared as the first name and the last name, and this is the function that we have made something called full name. Basically this function actually takes the parameters called fname and the lname. So how can we access these two variables inside this function? So while going through globals parameter in PHP, we can access these two variables inside this function block. So basically by using this guys globals fname, it means that this is the index name. It means that this is the variable name, right? So by using fname and the lname, we have just concatenated these two values and stored inside full name variable, and basically we have used as the index inside this globals. It means that this is also a global variable. So now we have defined our function to execute or take the name of full name of these two sections, right? So here is the function that we have called like full name. This is the function that we have called. So now calling this function guys, actually we have defined or we can use this full name as a global variable. So right now we have echo that. So let's understand about the scope of variables first to get about the concept details of our global variable. So if I open a new tab, so first of all we have a scope called local. So if I go to our PDF, this is our variable scopes and something called local variable. So what basically local variable is, suppose we have a function called, let's say, calculate. This function takes some of the parameters, so let's say that inside these variables we have something, let's say number 1, and also we have a parameter called number 2. Okay, right now we have declared some of the variables inside this function, so let's say that sum equal to, let's say, number 1 plus, and let's say number 2. So basically guys, this is known as a local variable of this function because this is not used by the globals. That means that this is a variable scope or locally to this function, and these are called our function parameters. So here we can understand is that basically sum equal to, let's say, local variable because it's a scope within inside this function, and also we have, let's say, number 1 and number 2. These are two are called function parameters, so let's say that function parameters. Okay, so if you go to the PDF section, this is our function parameters right here that we have defined or passed inside this function. So by getting these parameters guys, actually we can manipulate or calculate any values according to these passed parameters. So if we go to the function block, suppose if we want to actually access this sum variable outside this function, so let's say that echo sum. Basically we don't get any value of this sum variable because its scope as a locally inside this function. So how can we take this value to outside of this function? So for that we need to declare a global variable, or without declaring any global variable guys, actually we can store these calculations inside a global variable. So let's say that globals, inside this let's say that sum of numbers, this is the index, it means that this is the variable name, and also let's store the sum value inside the sum of numbers. So basically we can access these global variables outside this function because as we know that this is a global variable. So let's understand about this concept in deep by using opcode. Okay, so just back to folder structure. This is the file that we have made called global.php. Right now it contains no code. So if I open in editor, this is a file called global.php. Right now this is empty. So let's say that inside this PHP tag, first let's say that number 1, it contains a value something called 10 or 12, and let's say another variable something called number 2, which basically contains, let's say, 20 value. Okay, we are going to make a function, so let's say function name something called calculate. Inside this function guys, we are going to pass two parameters to add something called number 1, let's say number 1 and number 2. Basically by getting these two parameters we want to add these two variables. Okay, so let's say a equal to something called number 1 plus number 2. So if I declare this a variable, let's say that a equal to 0, it means that we have initialized a variable. So if I just echo this a outside of this function and just save this file while calling, and also let's call this function. So let's say here we have called the function and we have to pass up some parameters. So number 1, this is the variable that we have declared, and also let's say number 2. So basically guys, we have called this function, and now inside this function we are just adding these two variables and assigning it to variable a. So if I save this file, go to browser, and now this is the path. So if I reload this page, right now we are getting 0 value. So if I make zoom of that, this is 0 value. Why we are getting? Because this is the variable that we have initialized, and this is actually treated as a local variable. This is not reinitialized to this global variable. So here is something concept of local variable inside this function call. So how can we actually make it as a global variable? So first of all, this is the variable that we have declared, treated as a global variable. So how can we call this variable? So first of all, let's say declare global a. As we have declared global with variable a, it means that we are going to use this variable inside this function block. So global variable a, it means that we have added these two values and assigned to a. Directly we have assigned this value to this variable. So if I save this file, go to browser, reload this page, and now as we can see that this is the value called something 32. This is because we have added these two values as we have stored inside number 1 and number 2. This is first option to use our global variables by declaring with global. Okay. Also we have another option. So if I make comment of this line, let's say comment, and also by using global variables as we have discussed. So let's say global. Inside this single quote, we have to pass the index of that variable. So this is index name something called a. So this is something called a, and we are going to add our number 1 plus number 2. So if I save this file, go to browser, reload this page, again we are getting 32 value. It means that we are directly accessing our global variable. So basically guys, the main concern of this video session is to understand about the global variables scope in our function. So basically in a WordPress setup, there are many predefined global variables actually WordPress defined, as we have seen about many plugin development tutorials and many more tutorials inside online web tutor. We have used some variables like global WPDB, something called global post. These are the variables treated as a global parameters. So how can we use inside the WordPress? All we have seen about these concepts in our upcoming videos. So I think guys that by the help of this video session actually we understood about the whole concept of global variables inside PHP. So if you have any query in this video session guys, then please drop your comment. I will give my reply as soon as possible. So for this video session guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day.